The Keys Dan Show. It's the Keys Dan Show. I need a new theme for the Keys Dan Show. You might hear news. You might learn things. You never know what you're going to get on the Keys Dan Show. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah. What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live and in living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, The Keys Dan Show. It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you can have me at your next event. And if you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous? Find it everywhere using the hashtag, What Makes You Famous? Now, on with the show. Today on the program, Merry Christmas. Now, I know in some parts of the globe, that may be a very controversial statement. But when I was growing up, at least in Miami, Florida, surrounded by Catholics at the Catholic school, Merry Christmas was a saying that was very commonplace. So I decided I want to learn more about Christmas. And if you like the sound of my voice, let's learn together right here on the Keys Dan Show. Christmas is an annual festival commemorating the birth of Jesus Christ, observed primarily on December 25th as a religious and cultural celebration among billions of people around the world. A feast central to the Christian liturgical year or church year. It is preceded by Advent or the Nativity Feast and initiates the season of Christmastide, which historically in the West lasts 12 days and culminates on 12th night. In some traditions, Christmastide includes an octave. Now I had to look that up. Octave has two senses in Christian liturgical usage. The first sense, it is the 8th day after a feast, reckoning inclusively, and so always falls on the same day of the week as the feast itself. The word is derived from Latin octava, eighth, with dies, day, understood. In the second sense, the term is applied to the whole period of these 8 days, during which certain major feasts came to be observed. Christmas Day is a public holiday in many of the world's nations, is celebrated religiously by a majority of Christians, as well as culturally by many non-Christians, and forms an integral part of the holiday season centered around it. The traditional Christmas narrative, the Nativity of Jesus, delineated in the New Testament, says that Jesus was born in Bethlehem in accordance with messianic prophecies. When Joseph and Mary arrived in the city, the inn had no room, and so they were offered a stable where the Christ child was soon born, with angels proclaiming the news to shepherds who then further disseminated the information. Although the month and date of Jesus' birth are unknown, the church in the early 4th century fixed the date as December 25th. This corresponds to the date of the winter solstice on the Roman calendar. Most Christians celebrate on December 25th in the Gregorian calendar, which has been adopted almost universally in the civil calendars used in countries throughout the world. However, some Eastern Christian churches celebrate Christmas on December 25th of the older Julian calendar, which currently corresponds to a January date in the Gregorian calendar. For Christians believing that God came into the world in the form of man to atone for the sins of humanity, rather than knowing Jesus' exact birth date, is considered to be the primary purpose in celebrating Christmas. The celebratory customs associated in various countries with Christmas have a mix of pre-Christian, Christian, and secular themes and origins. Popular modern customs of the holiday include gift giving, completing an Advent calendar or Advent wreath, Christmas music and caroling, viewing a nativity play, an exchange of Christmas cards, church services, a special meal, and the display of various Christmas decorations, including Christmas trees, Christmas lights, nativity scenes, garlands, wreaths, mistletoe, and holly. In addition, several closely related and often interchangeable figures known as Santa Claus, Father Christmas, Saint Nicholas, and Christikind are associated with bringing gifts to children during the Christmas season and have their own body of traditions and lore. Because gift giving and many other aspects of the Christmas festival involve heightened economic activity, the holiday has become a significant event and a key sales period for retailers and businesses. The economic impact of Christmas has grown steadily over the past few centuries in many regions of the world. Here's the etymology of Christmas. Christmas is a shortened form of Christ's Mass. The word is recorded as Christ's Mass in 1038 and Christus Messi in 1131. Christ, Christ, is from Greek Christos, Khristos, translation of the Hebrew Messiah, meaning anointed, and Massa is from Latin Missa, the celebration of the Eucharist. The form Christian Mass was also historically used, but is now considered archaic and dialectal. Term derives from Middle English Christen Masse, meaning Christian Mass. Xmas is an abbreviation of Christmas found particularly in print, based on the initial letter Chi, X, in Greek, Christos. Christ, though numerous style guides discourage its use. This abbreviation has precedent in Middle English XPES, MASSE, where XP is an abbreviation for XPIOTOC. And from what I can deduce, it's the abbreviation for Christ. Other names. In addition to Christmas, the holiday has been known by various other names throughout its history. The Anglo-Saxons referred to the feast as midwinter, or more rarely as Natulio, from Latin nativius. Pardon my Latin, it's a little rusty. Nativity, meaning birth, is from Latin nativitas. In Old English, Jeola, Yule, referred to the period corresponding to December and January, which was eventually equated with Christian Christmas. Noel, or Nowel, Nowel, entered English in the late 14th century and is from the Old French Noël, or Nael, Nael, itself ultimately from the Latin natalis, dies, meaning birth. I didn't know I was going to be learning so much Latin, but it stands to reason. Let's go through nativity. The Gospels of Luke and Matthew describe Jesus as being born in Bethlehem to the Virgin Mary. In Luke, Joseph and Mary travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem for the census, and Jesus is born there and laid in a manger. Angels proclaimed him a savior for all people, and shepherds came to adore him. Matthew adds that the Magi follow a star to Bethlehem to bring gifts to Jesus. Born the King of the Jews, King Herod orders the massacre of all the boys less than 2 years old in Bethlehem, but the family flees to Egypt and later returns to Nazareth. Here's some history. The nativity sequences included in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke prompted early Christian writers to suggest various dates for the anniversary. Although no date is indicated in the Gospels, Early Christians connected Jesus to the Son through the use of such phrases as Son of Righteousness. The Romans marked the winter solstice on December 25th. The first recorded Christmas celebrated was in Rome on the 25th of December, 336. In the 3rd century, the date of the Nativity was the subject of great interest. Around AD 200, Clement of Alexandria wrote, quote, "There are those who have determined not only the year of our Lord's birth, but also the day, and they say that it took place in the 28th year of August and in the 25th day of the Egyptian month Pachon, Pachon, May 20th. Others say that he was born on the 24th or 25th of Pharmuthi, Parmuthi, April 20th or 21st, end quote. Various factors contributed to the selection of December 25th as a date of celebration. It was the date of the winter solstice on the Roman calendar, and it was about 9 months after March 25th, the date of vernal equinox, and a date linked to the conception of Jesus, now Annunciation. Christmas played a role in the Arian controversy of the 4th century. After this controversy ran its course, the prominence of the holiday declined for a few centuries. The feast regained prominence after 800 when Charlemagne was crowned emperor on Christmas Day. Later, during the Protestant Reformation, the Puritans banned Christmas in England, associating it with drunkenness and other misbehavior. It was restored as a legal holiday in England in 1660, but remained disreputable in the minds of many people. In the early 19th century, Christmas was reconceived by Washington Irving, Charles Dickens, and other authors as a holiday emphasizing family, children, kind-heartedness, gift-giving, and Santa Claus. Introduction of the festival. Christmas does not appear on the list of festivals given by the early Christian writers Irenaeus and Tertullian. Origen and Arnubulus both fault the pagans for celebrating birthdays, which suggests that Christmas was not celebrated in their time. Arnobius wrote after AD 297 the chronography of 354 records that a Christmas celebration took place in Rome in 336. In the East, the birth of Jesus was celebrated in connection with Epiphany on January the 6th. This holiday was not primarily about the Nativity, but rather the baptism of Jesus. Christmas was promoted in the East as part of the revival of Orthodox Christianity that followed the death of the pro-Arian emperor Valens at the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD. The feast was introduced in Constantinople in 379, in Antioch by John Chrysostom towards the end of the 4th century, probably in 388, and in Alexandria in the following century. Solstice date. December 25th was the date of the winter solstice on the Roman calendar. A late 4th century sermon by St. Augustine explains why this was a fitting day to celebrate Christ's nativity. Quote, "Hence it is that he was born on the day which is the shortest in our earthly reckoning, and from which subsequent days begin to increase in length. He, therefore, who bent low and lifted us up, chose the shortest day, yet the one whence light begins to increase." End quote. Linking Jesus to the Son was supported by various biblical passages. Jesus was considered to be the, quote, Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, Son of Righteousness, end quote. Prophesied by Malachi, quote, Unto you shall the Son, S-U-N, of Righteousness arise, and healing is in his wings, end quote. Such solar symbolism could support more than one date of birth. An anonymous work known as De Pascha Computus, 243 AD, linked the idea that creation began at the spring equinox on March 25th with the conception or birth. The word Nazcor can mean either of Jesus on March 28th. The day of the creation of the sun, S-U-N, in the Genesis account, one translation reads, quote, Oh, the splendid and divine providence of the Lord, that on that day, the very day on which the sun was made, March 28th, a Wednesday, Christ should be born, end quote. In the 17th century, Isaac Newton argued that the date of Christmas was selected to correspond with the solstice. According to Stephen Hymans of the University of Alberta, quote, it is cosmic symbolism which inspired the church leadership in Rome to elect the southern solstice, December 25th, as the birthday of Christ, and the northern solstice as that of John the Baptist, supplemented by the equinoxes as their respective dates of conception, end quote. Calculation hypothesis. The calculation hypothesis suggests that an earlier holiday held on March 25th became associated with the Incarnation. Modern scholars refer to this feast as the quartodecimal. Christmas was then calculated as 9 months later. The calculation hypothesis was proposed by French writer Louis Duchesne in 1889. In modern times, March 25th is celebrated as Annunciation. This holiday was created in the 7th century and was assigned to a date that is 9 months before Christmas. In addition to being the traditional date of the equinox, it is unrelated to the quartodecimal, which had been forgotten by this time. Early Christians celebrated the life of Jesus on a date considered equivalent to 14 Nisan, Passover, on the local calendar. Because Passover was held on the 14th of the month, this feast is referred to as the quartodecimal. All the major events of Christ's life, especially the Passion, were celebrated on this date. In the letter to the Corinthians, Paul mentions Passover, presumably celebrated according to the local calendar in Corinth. Tertullian, who lived in Latin-speaking North Africa, gives the date of Passion celebration as March 25th. The date of the Passion was moved to Good Friday in 165, when Pope Soter created Easter by reassigning the resurrection to a Sunday. According to the calculation hypothesis, the celebration of the quartodecimal continued in some areas, and the feast became associated with Incarnation. The calculation hypothesis is considered academically to be, quote, a thoroughly viable hypothesis, end quote, though not certain. It was a traditional Jewish belief that great men were born and died on the same day, so lived a whole number of years without fractions. Jesus was therefore considered to have been conceived on March 25th, as he died on March 25th, which was calculated to have coincided with 14 Nisan. A passage in Commentary on the Prophet Daniel, 204 AD, by Hippolytus of Rome identifies December 25th as the date of the Nativity. This passage is generally considered a late interpolation, but the manuscript includes another passage, one that is more likely to be authentic, that gives the Passion as March 25th. In the year 221, Sextus Julius Africanus, circa 160 to circa 240, gave March 25th as the day of creation and of the conception of Jesus in his universal history. This conclusion was based on solar symbolism, with March 25th as the date of the equinox, as this implies a birth in December. It is sometimes claimed to be the earliest identification of December 25th as the Nativity. However, Africanus was not such an influential writer that it is likely he determined the date of Christmas. The Tractate De Solstitia et Equinoxitia Conceptionis et Nativitas Domini Nostri Iesu Christi et Lohinus Baptiste. Whew, that was a mouthful, and I know I got all of that wrong. Falsely attributed to John Chrysostom, also argued that Jesus was conceived and crucified on the same day of the year and calculated this as March 25th. This anonymous tract also states, quote, "But our Lord too is born in the month of December, the 8th before the calends of January, the 25th of December. But they call it the birthday of the unconquered, who indeed is so unconquered as our Lord. Or if they say that it is the birthday of the Son, he is the Son of Justice." The History of Religions Hypothesis. The rival History of Religions hypothesis suggests that the Church selected December 25th date to appropriate festivities held by the Romans in honor of the sun god Sol Invictus. This cult was established by Aurelian in 274. An explicit expression of this theory appears in an annotation of uncertain date added to a manuscript of a work by 12th century Syrian bishop Jacob bar Salabi. The scribe who added it wrote, quote, "It was a custom of the pagans to celebrate on the same 25th of December the birthday of the sun, at which they kindled lights in token of festivity. In these solemnities and revelries, the Christians also took part accordingly. When the doctors of the church perceived that the Christians had a leaning to this festival, they took counsel and resolved that the true nativity should be solemnized on that day." End quote. In 1743, German Protestant Paul Ernst Jablonski argued Christmas was placed on December 25th to correspond with the Roman solar holiday Dies Natalis Solstice Invicti, and was therefore a paganization that debased the true church. It has been argued that, on the contrary, the Emperor Aurelian, who in 274 instituted the holiday of Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, did so partly as an attempt to give a pagan significance to a date already important for Christians in Rome. Hermann Usener and others proposed that the Christians chose this day because it was the Roman feast celebrating the birthday of Sol Invictus. Modern scholar S.E. Heijmans, however, states that, quote, "While they were aware that pagans called this day the birthday of Sol Invictus, this did not concern them, and it did not play any role in their choice of date for Christmas." End quote. Moreover, Thomas J. Talley holds that the Roman Emperor Aurelian placed a festival of Sol Invictus on December 25th in order to compete with the growing rate of the Christian church, which had already been celebrating Christmas on that date first. In the judgment of the Church of England Liturgical Commission, the history of religion's hypothesis has been challenged by a view based on old tradition, according to which the date of Christmas was fixed at 9 months after March 25th, the date of vernal equinox, on which the Annunciation was celebrated. With regard to a December religious feast of the deified sun, Sol, as distinct from a solstice feast of the birth or rebirth of the astronomical sun, one scholar has commented that, quote, while the winter solstice on or around December 25th was well established in the Roman imperial calendar, there is no evidence that a religious celebration of Sol on that day antedated the celebration of Christmas. Thomas Talley has shown, although Emperor Aurelian's dedication of a temple to the sun god in the Campus Martius, somewhere around 274, probably took place on the birthday of the invincible sun, on December 25th. The cult of the sun in pagan Rome, ironically, did not celebrate the winter solstice nor any of the other quarter tenth days as one might expect. The Oxford Companion to Christian Thought remarks on the uncertainty about the order of precedence between the religious celebrations of the birthday of the unconquered Son and the birthday of Jesus, stating that the hypothesis that December 25th was chosen for celebrating the birth of Jesus on the basis of the belief that his conception occurred on March 25th, quote, potentially establishes 25th of December as a Christian festival before Aurelian's decree, which, when promulgated, might have provided for the Christian feast both opportunity and challenge, end quote. Post-classical history. In the early Middle Ages, Christmas Day was overshadowed by Epiphany, which in Western Christianity focused on the visit of the Magi. But the medieval calendar was dominated by Christmas-related holidays. The 40 days before Christmas became the 40 days of St. Martin, which began on November 11th, the feast of St. Martin of Tours, now known as Advent. In Italy, former Saturnalian traditions were attached to Advent. Around the 12th century, these traditions transferred again to the 12 days of Christmas, December 25th to January 5th, a time that appears in the liturgical calendars as Christmastide or 12 Holy Days. The prominence of Christmas Day increased gradually after Charlemagne was crowned emperor on Christmas Day in 800. King Edmund the Martyr was anointed on Christmas in 855, and King William I of England was crowned on Christmas Day 1066. By the High Middle Ages, the holiday had become so prominent that chroniclers routinely noted where various magnates celebrated Christmas. King Richard II of England hosted a Christmas feast in 1377, at which 28 oxen and 300 sheep were eaten. The Yule boar was a common feature of medieval Christmas feasts. Caroling also became popular and was originally performed by a group of dancers who sang. The group was composed of a lead singer and a ring of dancers that provided the chorus. Various writers of the time condemned caroling as lewd indicating that the unruly traditions of Saturnalia and Yule may have continued in this form. Misrule, drunkenness, promiscuity, gambling was also an important aspect of the festival. In England, gifts were exchanged on New Year's Day, and there was a special Christmas ale. Christmas, during the Middle Ages, was a public festival that incorporated ivy, holly, and other evergreens. Christmas gift giving during the Middle Ages was usually between people with legal relationships, such as tenant and landlord. The annual indulgence in eating, dancing, singing, sporting, and card playing escalated in England, and by the 17th century, the Christmas season featured lavish dinners, elaborate masks, and pageants. In 1607, King James I insisted that a play be acted on Christmas night and that the court indulge in games. It was during the Reformation in 16th and 17th century Europe that many Protestants changed the gift bringer to the Christ child or Christekind, and the date of giving gifts changed from December 6th to Christmas Eve. Modern history. Associating it with drunkenness and other misbehavior, the Puritans banned Christmas in England in the 17th century. It was restored as a legal holiday in 1660, but remained disreputable. In the early 19th century, the Oxford movement in the Anglican Church ushered in the development of richer and more symbolic forms of worship. The building of neo-Gothic churches and the revival and increasing centrality of the keeping of Christmas itself as a Christian festival, as well as special charities for the poor, in addition to special services and musical events. Charles Dickens and other writers helped in this revival of the holiday by changing consciousness of Christmas and the way in which it was celebrated, as they emphasized family, religion, gift-giving, and social reconciliation, as opposed to the historic revelry common in some places. The 18th century. Following the Protestant Reformation, many of the new denominations, including the Anglican Church and Lutheran Church, continued to celebrate Christmas. In 1629, the Anglican poet John Milton penned On the Morning of Christ's Nativity, a poem that has since been read by many during Christmastide. Donald Hines, a professor at California State University, states that Martin Luther inaugurated a period in which Germany would produce a unique culture of Christmas, much copied in North America. Among the congregations of the Dutch Reformed Church, Christmas was celebrated as one of the principal evangelical feasts. However, in 17th century England, some groups, such as Puritans, strongly condemned the celebration of Christmas, considering it a Catholic invention, and the trappings of popery, or the rags of the beast. In contrast, the established Anglican Church pressed for a more elaborate observance of feasts, penitential seasons, and saints' days. The calendar reform became a major point of tension between the Anglican Party and the Puritan Party. The Catholic Church also responded, promoting the festival in a more religiously oriented form. King Charles I of England directed his noblemen and gentry to return to their landed estates in midwinter to keep up their old-style Christmas generosity. Following the parliamentarian victory over Charles I during the English Civil War, England's Puritan rulers banned Christmas in 1647. Protests followed as pro-Christmas rioting broke out in several cities. For weeks, Canterbury was controlled by the rioters, who decorated doorways with holly and shouted royalist slogans. The book, The Vindication of Christmas, London, 1652, argued against the Puritans and makes note of old English Christmas traditions: dinner, roast apples on the fire, card playing, dances with plowboys and maidservants, Old Father Christmas, and carol singing. The restoration of King Charles II in 1660 ended the ban, but many Calvinist clergymen still disapproved of Christmas celebration. As such, in Scotland, the Presbyterian Church of Scotland discouraged the observance of Christmas, and though James VI commanded its celebration in 1618, attendance at church was scant. The Parliament of Scotland officially abolished the observance of Christmas in 1640, claiming that the church had been purged of all superstitious observation of days. It was not until 1958 that Christmas again became a Scottish public holiday. Following the restoration of Charles II, Poor Robin's Almanac contained the lines, quote, "Now thanks to God for Charles' return, I, whose absence made old Christmas mourn, for then we scarcely did it know, whether it Christmas were or no." End quote. The Diary of James Woodford, from the latter half of the 18th century, details the observance of Christmas and celebrations associated with the season over a number of years. In colonial America, the Pilgrims of New England shared radical Protestant disapproval of Christmas. The Plymouth Pilgrims put their loathing for the day into practice in 1620, when they spent their first Christmas day in the New World working, thus demonstrating their complete contempt for the day. Non-Puritans in New England deplored the loss of the holidays enjoyed by the laboring classes in England. Christmas observance was outlawed in Boston in 1659. The ban by the Puritans was revoked in 1681 by English Governor Edmund Andros. However, it was not until the mid-19th century that celebrating Christmas became fashionable in the Boston region. At the same time, Christian residents of Virginia and New York observed the holiday freely. Pennsylvania German settlers, preeminently the Moravian settlers of Bethlehem, Nazareth, and Leipzig in Pennsylvania, the Wachovia settlements in North Carolina, were enthusiastic celebrators of Christmas. The Moravians in Bethlehem had the first Christmas trees in America, as well as the first nativity scenes. Christmas fell out of favor in the United States after the American Revolution, when it was considered an English custom. George Washington attacked Hessian German mercenaries on the day after Christmas during the Battle of Trenton on December 26, 1776, Christmas being much more popular in Germany than in America at this time. With the aesthetic cult of reason in power during the era of revolutionary France, Christian Christmas religious services were banned, and the Three Kings cake was renamed the Equality Cake under anti-clerical government policies. The 19th century. In the UK, Christmas Day became a bank holiday. In 1834, Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, was added in 1871. In the early 19th century, writers imagined Tudor Christmas as a time of heartfelt celebration. In 1843, Charles Dickens wrote the novel A Christmas Carol that helped revive the spirit of Christmas and seasonal merriment. Its instant popularity played a major role in portraying Christmas as a holiday emphasizing family, goodwill, and compassion. Dickens sought to construct Christmas as a family-centered festival of generosity, linking worship and feasting within a context of social reconciliation, superimposing his humanitarian vision of the holiday. In what has been termed carol philosophy, Dickens influenced many aspects of Christmas that are celebrated today in Western culture, such as family gatherings, seasonal food and drink, dancing, games, and a festive generosity of spirit. A prominent phrase from the tale, Merry Christmas, was popularized following the appearance of the story. This coincided with the appearance of the Oxford movement and the growth of Anglo-Catholicism, which led a revival in traditional rituals and religious observances. The term Scrooge became a synonym for miser, with bah, humbug, dismissive of the festive spirit. In 1843, the first commercial Christmas card was produced by Sir Henry Cole. The revival of the Christmas Carol began with William Sandys' Christmas Carols Ancient and Modern, 1833, with the first appearance in print of The First Noel, I Saw Three Ships, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, popularized in Dickens' A Christmas Carol. In Britain, the Christmas tree was introduced in the early 19th century, following the personal union with the Kingdom of Hanover by Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, wife of King George III. In 1832, the future Queen Victoria wrote about her delight at having a Christmas tree hung with lights, ornaments, and presents placed around it. After her marriage to her German cousin, Prince Albert, by 1841, the custom became more widespread throughout Britain. An image of the British royal family with their Christmas tree at Windsor Castle created a sensation when it was published in the Illustrated London News in 1848. A modified version of this image was published in the United States in 1850. By the 1870s, putting up a Christmas tree had become common in America. In America, interest in Christmas had been revived in the 1820s by several short stories by Washington Irving, which appear in his sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, Gent, and Old Christmas. Irving's stories depicted harmonious, warm-hearted English Christmas festivities he experienced while staying in Ashton Hall, Birmingham, England, that had largely been abandoned. And he used the tract Vindication of Christmas, 1652, of old English Christmas traditions that he had transcribed into his journal as a format for his stories. In 1822, Clement Clarke Moore wrote the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, popularly known by its first line, "'Twas the night before Christmas." The poem helped popularize the tradition of exchanging gifts, and seasonal Christmas shopping began to assume economic importance. This also started the cultural conflict between the holiday's spiritual significance and its associated commercialism that some see as corrupting the holiday. In her 1850 book, The First Christmas in New England, Harriet Beecher Stowe includes a character who complains that the true meaning of Christmas was lost in a shopping spree. While the celebration of Christmas was not yet customary in some regions in the U.S., Henry Wadsworth Longfellow detected a transition state about Christmas here in New England in 1856. The old Puritan feeling prevents it from being a cheerful, hearty holiday, though every year makes it more so. In Reading, Pennsylvania, a newspaper remarked in 1861, "Even our Presbyterian friends who have hitherto steadfastly ignored Christmas threw open their church doors and assembled in force to celebrate the anniversary of the Savior's birth. The First Congregational Church of Rockford, Illinois, although of genuine Puritan stock, was preparing for a grand Christmas jubilee. A news correspondent reported in 1864. By 1860, 14 states, including several from New England, had adopted Christmas as a legal holiday. In 1875, Louis Prang introduced the Christmas card to Americans. He has been called the father of the American Christmas card. On June 28, 1870, Christmas was formally declared a United States federal holiday. The 20th century. Up to the 1950s, in the UK, many Christmas customs were restricted to upper classes and better off families. The mass of the population had not adopted many of the Christmas rituals that later became general. The Christmas tree was rare. Christmas dinner might be beef or goose, certainly not turkey. In their stockings, children might get an apple, orange, and sweets. Full celebration of a family Christmas with all the trimmings only became widespread with increased prosperity from the 1950s. National papers were published on Christmas Day until 1912. Post was still delivered on Christmas Day until 1961. League football matches continued in Scotland until the 1970s, while in England they ceased at the end of the 1950s. Under the state atheism of the Soviet Union, after its foundation in 1917, Christmas celebrations, along with other Christian holidays, were prohibited in public. During the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, the League of Militant Atheists encouraged school pupils to campaign against Christmas traditions, such as the Christmas tree, as well as other Christian holidays, including Easter. The League established an anti-religious holiday to be the 31st of each month as a replacement. At the height of this persecution, in 1929, on Christmas Day, children in Moscow were encouraged to spit on crucifixes as a protest against the holiday. It was not until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 that the persecution ended and Orthodox Christmas became a state holiday again for the first time in Russia after 7 decades. European history professor Joseph Perry wrote that likewise in Nazi Germany, because Nazi ideologies saw organized religion as an enemy of the totalitarian state, propagandists sought to de-emphasize or eliminate altogether the Christian aspects of the holiday, and that propagandists tirelessly promoted numerous Nazified Christmas songs, which replace Christian themes with regime's racial ideologies. As Christmas celebration began to be held around the world, even outside traditional Christian cultures in the 20th century, some Muslim-majority countries subsequently banned the practice of Christmas, claiming it undermines Islam. Observance and traditions. Christmas Day is celebrated as a major festival and public holiday in countries around the world, including many whose populations are mostly non-Christian. In some non-Christian areas, periods of former colonial rule introduced the celebration. For example, Hong Kong. In others, Christian minorities or foreign cultural influences have led populations to observe the holiday. Countries such as Japan, where Christmas is popular despite there being only a small number of Christians, have adopted many of the secular aspects of Christmas, such as gift giving, decorations, and Christmas trees. Among countries with a strong Christian tradition, a variety of Christmas celebrations have developed that incorporate regional and local cultures. Church attendance. Christmas Day, inclusive of its vigil, Christmas Eve, is a festival in the Lutheran churches, a holy day of obligation in the Roman Catholic Church, and a principal feast of the Anglican Communion. Other Christian denominations do not rank their feast days, but nevertheless place importance on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. As with other Christian feasts like Easter, Ascension Day, and Pentecost. As such, for Christians, attending a Christmas Eve or Christmas Day church service plays an important part in the recognition of the Christmas season. Christmas, along with Easter, is the period of highest annual church attendance. A 2010 survey by Lifeway Christian Resources found that 6 in 10 Americans attend church services during this time. In the United Kingdom, the Church of England reported an estimated attendance of 2.5 million people at Christmas services in 2015. Decorations. Nativity scenes are known from 10th century Rome. They were popularized by Saint Francis of Assisi from 1223, quickly spreading across Europe. Different types of decorations developed across the Christian world, dependent on local tradition and available resources, and can vary from simple representations of the crib to far more elaborate sets. Renowned manger scene traditions include the colorful Krakow Zozpa in Poland, which imitate Krakow's historical buildings as settings, the elaborate Italian presby, Neapolitan Genoese, and Bolognese, or the provincial creches in southern France, using hand-painted terracotta figurines called santons. In certain parts of the world, notably Sicily, living nativity scenes following the tradition of St. Francis are a popular alternative to static creches. The first commercially produced decorations appeared in Germany in the 1860s, inspired by paper chains made by children. In countries where a representation of the nativity scene is very popular, people are encouraged to compete and create the most original or realistic ones. Within some families, the pieces used to make the representation are considered a valuable family heirloom. The traditional colors of Christmas decorations are red, green, and gold. Red symbolizes the blood of Jesus, which was shed in his crucifixion, while green symbolizes eternal life. And in particular, the evergreen tree, which does not lose its leaves in winter, and gold is the first color associated with Christmas as one of the 3 gifts of the Magi, symbolizing royalty. The Christmas tree was first used by German Lutherans in the 16th century, with records indicating that a Christmas tree was placed in the Cathedral of Strasbourg in 1539, under the leadership of the Protestant reformer Martin Bucer. In the United States, these German Lutherans brought the decorated Christmas tree with them. The Moravians put lighted candles on those trees. When decorating the Christmas tree, many individuals place a star at the top of the tree, symbolizing the Star of Bethlehem, a fact recorded by the School Journal in 1897. Professor David Albert Jones of Oxford University writes that in the 19th century, it became popular for people to also use an angel to top the Christmas tree in order to symbolize the angels mentioned in the accounts of the Nativity of Jesus. The Christmas tree is considered by some as the Christianization of pagan tradition and rituals surrounding the winter solstice, which included the use of evergreen boughs and an adaptation of pagan tree worship. According to 8th century biographer Eddie Stephanus, Saint Boniface, 634 to 709, who was a missionary in Germany, took an axe to an oak tree dedicated to Thor and pointed out a fir tree, which he stated was a more fitting object of reverence because it pointed to heaven, and it had a triangular shape, which he said was symbolic of the Trinity. The English language phrase Christmas tree is first recorded in 1835 and represents an importation from the German language. Since the 16th century, the poinsettia, a native plant from Mexico, has been associated with Christmas, carrying the Christian symbolicism of the Star of Bethlehem. In that country, it is known in Spanish as the flower of the Holy Night. Other popular holiday plants include holly, mistletoe, red amaryllis, and Christmas cactus. Other traditional decorations include bells, candles, candy canes, stockings, wreaths, and angels. Both the displaying of wreath and candles in each window are a more traditional Christmas display. The concentric assortment of leaves, usually from an evergreen, make up Christmas wreaths and are designed to prepare Christians for the Advent season. Candles in each window are meant to demonstrate the fact that Christians believe that Jesus Christ is the ultimate light of the world. Christmas lights and banners may be hung along streets, music played from speakers, and Christmas trees placed in prominent places. It is common in many parts of the world for town squares and consumer shopping areas to sponsor and display decorations. Rolls of brightly colored paper with secular or religious Christmas motifs are manufactured for the purpose of wrapping gifts. In some countries, Christmas decorations are traditionally taken down on Twelfth Night. Nativity play. For the Christian celebration of Christmas, the viewing of the Nativity play is one of the oldest Christmas time traditions, with the first reenactment of the Nativity of Jesus taking place in AD 1223. In that year, Francis of Assisi assembled a nativity scene outside of his church in Italy, and children sung Christmas carols celebrating the birth of Jesus. Each year, this grew larger, and people traveled from afar to see Francis's depiction of the Nativity of Jesus that came to feature drama and music. Nativity plays eventually spread throughout all of Europe, where they remain popular. Christmas Eve and Christmas Day church services often came to feature nativity plays, as did school theaters. In France, Germany, Mexico, and Spain, nativity plays are often reenacted outdoors in the streets. Music and carols. The earliest extant, specifically Christmas hymns, appear in 4th century Rome Latin hymns as Veni Redemptor Gentium, written by Ambrose, Archbishop of Milan, where austere statements of the theological doctrine of the Incarnation in opposition to Arianism, Corde Natus Ex Parentis, or the Father's Love Begotten, by the Spanish poet Prudentius, died for, is still sung in some churches today. In the 9th and 10th centuries, the Christmas sequence or prose was introduced in North European monasteries, developing under Bernard of Clairvaux into a sequence of rhymed stanzas. In the 12th century, the Parisian monk Adam of St. Victor began to derive music from popular songs, introducing something closer to the traditional Christmas carol. The songs now known specifically as carols were originally communal folk sung songs during celebration such as Harvest Tide, as well as Christmas. It was only later that carols began to be sung in church. Traditionally, carols have often been based on medieval chord patterns, and it is this that gives them their uniquely characteristic musical sound. Some carols, like Personal Hody, Good King Wenceslas, and The Holly and the Ivy, can be traced directly back to the Middle Ages. They are among the oldest musical compositions still regularly sung. Adestus Vidalis, O Come All Ye Faithful, appears in its current form in the mid 18th century, although the words may have originated in the 13th century. The singing of carols initially suffered a decline in popularity after the Protestant Reformation in Northern Europe. Although some reformers, like Martin Luther, wrote carols and encouraged their use in worship, carols largely survived in rural communities until the revival of interest in popular songs in the 19th century. The 18th century English reformer Charles Wesley understood the importance of music to worship. In addition to setting many psalms to melodies, which were influential in the Great Awakening in the United States, he wrote texts for at least 3 Christmas carols. The best known was originally titled Hark, How the Welkin Rings, later renamed Hark, the Herald Angels Sing. Completely secular Christmas seasonal songs emerged in the late 18th century. Deck the Halls dates from 1784, and the American Jingle Bells was copyrighted in 1857. In the 19th and 20th centuries, African American spirituals and songs about Christmas, based in their tradition of spirituals, became more widely known. An increasing number of seasonal holiday songs were commercially produced in the 20th century, including jazz and blues variations. In addition, there was a revival of interest in early music from groups singing folk music, such as the Revels, to performers of early medieval and classical music. John Rutter has composed many carols, including All Bells in Paradise, Angel's Carol, Candlelight Carol, Donkey Carol, Jesus Child, Shepherd's Pipe, and Star Carol. Traditional cuisine. A special family meal is traditionally an important part of the holiday celebration, and the food that is served varies greatly from country to country. Some regions have special meals for Christmas Eve, such as Sicily, where 12 kinds of fish are served. In the United Kingdom and countries influenced by its traditions, a standard Christmas meal includes turkey, goose, or other large bird, gravy, potatoes, vegetables, some bread, and cider. Special desserts are also prepared, such as Christmas pudding, mince pies, fruit cakes, panettone, and Yule log cake. Traditional Christmas meal in Central Europe is fried carp or other fish. Cards. Christmas cards are illustrated messages of greeting exchanged between friends and family members during the weeks preceding Christmas Day. The traditional greeting reads, "Wishing you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year," much like that of the first commercial Christmas card, produced by Sir Henry Cole in London in 1843. The custom of sending them has become popular among a wide cross-section of people with the emergence of the modern trend towards exchanging e-cards. Christmas cards are purchased in considerable quantities and feature artwork commercially designed and relevant to the season. The content of the design might relate directly to the Christmas narrative, with depictions of the Nativity of Jesus or Christian symbols such as the Star of Bethlehem or a white dove, which can represent both the Holy Spirit and peace on earth. Other Christmas cards are more secular and can depict Christmas traditions, mythical figures such as Santa Claus, objects directly associated with Christmas such as candles, holly, and baubles, or a variety of images associated with the season, such as Christmastide activities, snow scenes, and the wildlife of the northern winter. There are even humorous cards and genres depicting nostalgic scenes of the past, such as crinoline shoppers in idealized 19th century streetscapes. Some prefer cards with a poem, prayer, or biblical verse, while others distance themselves from religion with an all-inclusive season's greeting. Commemorative stamps. A number of nations have issued commemorative stamps at Christmastide. Postal customers will often use these stamps to mail Christmas cards, and they are popular with philatelists. These stamps are regular postage stamps, unlike Christmas seals, and are valid for postage year-round. They usually go on sale sometime between early October and early December, and are printed in considerable quantities. Gift giving. The exchanging of gifts is one of the core aspects of the modern Christmas celebration, making it the most profitable time of the year for retailers and businesses throughout the world. On Christmas, people exchange gifts based on the Christian tradition associated with St. Nicholas, and the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which were given to the baby Jesus by the Magi. The practice of gift giving in the Roman celebration of Saturnalia may have influenced Christian customs, but on the other hand, Christian core dogma of the Incarnation, however, solidly established the giving and receiving of gifts as the structural principle of the recurring yet unique event. Because it was the biblical Magi, together with their fellow men who received the gift of God through man's renewed participation in the divine life. Gift-bearing figures. A number of figures are associated with Christmas and the seasonal giving of gifts. Among these are Father Christmas, also known as Santa Claus, derived from the Dutch for Saint Nicholas, Père Noël, and the Weltscheidsman, Saint Nicholas or Sinterklaas, the Christkind, Kris Kringle, Joulupukki, Tomte Nice, Babo Nathalie, Saint Basil, and Dead Moroz. The Scandinavian Tomte, also called Nice, is sometimes depicted as a gnome instead of Santa Claus. The best known of these figures today is the red-dressed Santa Claus, of diverse origins. The name Santa Claus can be traced back to Dutch Sinterklaas, which simply means Saint Nicholas. Nicholas was a 4th century Greek bishop of Myra, a city in the Roman province of Lycia, whose ruins are 3 kilometers from modern Demre in southwest Turkey. Among other saintly attributes, he was noted for the care of children, generosity, and the giving of gifts. His feast day, December 6th, came to be celebrated in many countries with the giving of gifts. Saint Nicholas traditionally appeared in a bishop's attire, accompanied by helpers inquiring about the behavior of children during the past year before deciding whether they deserved a gift or not. By the 13th century, St. Nicholas was well known in the Netherlands, and the practice of gift giving in his name spread to other parts of Central and Southern Europe. At the Reformation in the 16th and 17th century Europe, many Protestants changed the gift bringer to the Christ child or Christikind, corrupted in English to Kris Kringle, and the date of giving gifts changed from December 6th to Christmas Eve. The modern popular image of Santa Claus, however, was created in the United States, and in particular in New York. The transformation was accomplished with the aid of notable contributors, including Washington Irving and the German-American cartoonist Thomas Nast, 1840 to 1902. Following the American Revolutionary War, some of the inhabitants of New York City sought out symbols of the city's non-English past. New York had originally been established as the Dutch colonial town of New Amsterdam, and the Dutch Sinterklaas tradition was reinvented as St. Nicholas. Current tradition in several Latin American countries, such as Venezuela and Colombia, holds that while Santa makes the toys, he then gives them to the baby Jesus, who is the one who actually delivers them to the children's homes. A reconciliation between traditional religious beliefs and the iconography of Santa Claus imported from the United States. In South Tyrol, Italy, Austria, Czech Republic, Southern Germany, Hungary, Liechtenstein, Slovakia, and Switzerland, the Christkind brings the presents. Greek children get their presents from St. Basil on New Year's Eve, the eve of that saint's liturgical feast. The German St. Nicholas is not identical with the Weihnachtskastellmann, who is the German version of Santa Claus, Father Christmas. St. Nicholas wears a bishop's dress and still brings small gifts, usually candles, nuts, and fruits, on December 6th, and is accompanied by Knecht Ruprecht. Although many parents around the world routinely teach their children about Santa Claus and other gift bringers, some have come to reject this practice, considering it deceptive. Multiple gift giver figures exist in Poland, varying between regions and individual families. St. Nicholas dominates central and northeast areas. The Starman is most common in Greater Poland. Baby Jesus is unique to the Upper Silesia, with the little star and the little angel being common in the south and southeast. Grandfather Frost is less commonly accepted in some areas of eastern Poland. It is worth noting that across all of Poland, St. Nicholas is the gift giver on the St. Nicholas Day, December 6th. The date according to the Julian calendar. Some jurisdictions of the Eastern Orthodox Church, including those of Russia, Georgia, Ukraine, Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Jerusalem, mark feasts using the older Julian calendar. As of 2019, there's a difference of 13 days between the Julian calendar and the modern Gregorian calendar, which is used internationally for most secular purposes. As a result, December 25th on the Julian calendar currently responds to January 7th on the calendar used by most governments and people in everyday life. Therefore, the aforementioned Orthodox Christians mark December 25th and thus Christmas on the day that is internationally considered to be January 7th. However, other Orthodox Christians, such as those belonging to the jurisdictions of Bulgaria, Greece, Romania, Constantinople, Antioch, Alexandria, Albania, Cyprus, Finland, and the Orthodox Church in America, among others, began using the revised Julian calendar in the early 20th century, which at present corresponds exactly to the Gregorian calendar. Therefore, these Orthodox Christians mark December 25th, and thus Christmas, on the same day that it's internationally considered to be December 25th, and which is also the date of Christmas among Western Christians. A further complication is added by the fact that the Armenian Apostolic Church continues the original ancient Eastern Christian practice of celebrating the birth of Christ, not as a separate holiday, but on the same day as the celebration of his baptism, Theophany, which is on January 6th. This is a public holiday in Armenia, and it is held on the same day that is internationally considered to be January 6th, because the Armenian Church in Armenia uses the Gregorian calendar. However, there is also a small Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem which maintains the traditional American custom of celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ on the same day as Theophany, January 6th, but uses the Julian calendar for the determination of that date. As a result, this church celebrates Christmas, more properly called Theophany, on the date that is considered January 19th on the Gregorian calendar, in use by the majority of the world. And now the economy of Christmas. Christmas is typically a peak selling season for retailers in many nations around the world. Sales increase dramatically as people purchase gifts, decorations, and supplies to celebrate. In the United States, the Christmas shopping season starts as early as October. In Canada, merchants begin advertising campaigns just before Halloween, October 31st, and step up their marketing following a Remembrance Day on November 11th. In the UK and Ireland, the Christmas shopping season starts from mid-November, around the time when high street Christmas lights are turned on. In the United States, it has been calculated that a quarter of all personal spending takes place during the Christmas holiday shopping season. Figures from the U.S. Census Bureau reveal that expenditure in department stores nationwide rose from $20.8 billion in November 2004 to $31.9 billion in December 2004, an increase of 54%. In other sectors, the pre-Christmas increase in spending was even greater, there being a November-December buying surge of 100% in bookstores and 170% in jewelry stores. In the same year, employment in American retail stores rose from 1.6 million to 1.8 million in the 2 months leading up to Christmas. Industries completely dependent on Christmas include Christmas cards, of which 1.9 billion are sent in the United States each year, and live Christmas trees, of which 20.8 million were cut in the U.S. in 2002. For 2019, the average U.S. adult was projected to spend $920 on gifts alone. In the UK in 2010, up to £8 billion was expected to be spent online at Christmas, approximately a quarter of total retail festive sales. In most Western nations, Christmas Day is the least active day of the year for business and commerce. Almost all retail, commercial, and institutional businesses are closed, and almost all industries cease activity more than any other day of the year, whether laws require such or not. In England and Wales, the Christmas Day Trading Act 2004 prevents all large shops from trading on Christmas Day. Scotland is currently planning similar legislation. Film studios release many high budget movies during the holiday season, including Christmas films, fantasy movies, or high tone dramas with high production values in hopes of maximizing the chance of nominations for the Academy Awards. One economist analysis calculates that despite increased overall spending, Christmas is a deadweight loss under orthodox microeconomic theory because of the effect of gift giving. This loss is calculated as the difference between what the gift giver spent on the item and what the gift receiver would have paid for the item. It is estimated that in 2001, Christmas resulted in a $4 billion deadweight loss in the U.S. alone. Because of complicating factors, this analysis is sometimes used to discuss possible flaws in current microeconomic theory. Other deadweight losses include the effect of Christmas on the environment and the fact that material gifts are often perceived as white elephants, imposing costs for upkeep and storage and contributing to clutter. Let's finish off this discussion on Christmas with controversies. Christmas has at times been the subject of controversy and attacks from various sources. Historically, it was prohibited by Puritans when they briefly held power in England, 1647 to 1660, and in colonial America, where Puritans outlawed the celebration of Christmas in 1659. The Parliament of Scotland, which was dominated by Presbyterians, passed a series of acts outlawing the observance of Christmas between 1637 and 1690. Christmas Day did not become a public holiday in Scotland until 1958. Christmas celebrations have also been prohibited by atheist states such as the Soviet Union, and more recently, majority Muslim states such as Somalia, Tajikistan, and Brunei. Some Christians and organizations, such as Pat Robertson's American Center for Law and Justice, cite alleged attacks on Christmas, dubbing them a war on Christmas. Such groups claim that any specific mention of the term Christmas or its religious aspects is being increasingly censored, avoided, or discouraged by a number of advertisers, retailers, government, prominently schools, and other public and private organizations. One controversy is the occurrence of Christmas trees being renamed holiday trees. In the U.S., there has been a tendency to replace the greeting Merry Christmas with Happy Holidays, which is considered inclusive at the time of the Jewish celebration of Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and Human Light. In the U.S. and Canada, where the use of the term holidays is most prevalent, opponents have denounced its usage and avoidance by using the term Christmas as being politically correct. In 1984, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Lynch versus Donnelly that a Christmas display, which included a nativity scene owned and displayed by the city of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, did not violate the First Amendment. American Muslim scholar Abdul Malik Mujahid has said that Muslims must treat Christmas with respect, even if they disagree with it. The government of the People's Republic of China officially espouses state atheism and has conducted anti-religious campaigns at this end. In December 2018, officials raided Christian churches just prior to Christmastide and coerced them to close. Christmas trees and Santa Clauses were also forcibly removed. Way to end that on a downer. I've learned a lot more about Christmas and Christmas celebrations. I hope you have too. Thanks for listening to The Keys Dan Show. And by the way, if you do want to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. That's it for this installment of The Keys Dan Show. I hope you learned about Christmas. It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. Keys Dan here. If you like the sound of my voice, I encourage you to follow Keys Dan Show on social media. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Keys Dan Show. YouTube at Keys Dan. If you don't mind, leave Keys Dan Show a review and subscribe. Listen to on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcast, and Spotify, and wherever you find podcasts. Email info@keysdan.com. Support Keys Dan Show by using paypal.me/KeysDan. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Keys Dan Show is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening. 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 Thank you for listening.